Hi guys, Ben from BensGameTime here. Bioshock, put simply, is a masterpiece of not only FPS games, but of gaming as a whole. The game perfectly mixes story, gameplay, and even philosophy into a truly one-of-a-kind experience. The game came out in 2007, and it has stood the test of time and continues to stand out as an amazing game. It's honestly one of my top 10 favorite games of all time, and there haven't been that many games that can match it. So, I'm going to go over why this game excels in its story, presentation, gameplay, and philosophical themes. If you haven't played Bioshock yet, then I highly recommend you play it before watching this video, so nothing gets spoiled for you. And with that, let's begin.
The way Bioshock not only tells a story but builds a world is just incredible. Right off the bat, the game gives you a roller coaster ride of an intro. The short time from the initial plane crash to entering Rapture sets the scene perfectly. The intro video played before getting to Rapture sets it up as a paradise, and visually the city is stunning. But then when you finally enter Rapture, you get slapped with the realization that everything is in shambles. A person gets murdered right in front of you, the bathysphere you rode in on is torn apart, and everything is dark and scary, with your only ray of hope being a guy on the radio named Atlas. From this point on, things slowly become clearer. Rapture has fallen apart, its inhabitants addicted to genetic modification, also known as splicing, and a civil war has been taking place. The founder of Rapture, Andrew Ryan, has been dealing with an uprising of people who've sided with a now-deceased man named Fontaine, while also holding true to the values that Rapture was founded on, those being individual freedom and human exceptionalism. The intro level of Bioshock sets up the story perfectly, but the truly amazing thing about Bioshock is how it continues building upon itself. The game looks beautiful, especially whenever you get a chance to look outside into the ocean. The underwater setting never feels lost, as there are times where you can see into the outside, while other times there are leaks of water that flood parts of Rapture. Hell, even the game's main enemy, the Big Daddy, is dressed up in old-school deep-sea diving gear.
He has a better fashion sense than I ever will.
Around the many parts of Rapture are objects just thrown about, blood and corpses are left everywhere, and the place feels mostly abandoned. Everything is dark, and there aren't any areas that are bright or lively. This is definitely the aftermath of the disasters that took place before you got to Rapture. As you continue through the game, you get to see the many different parts of Rapture, from the medical pavilion to the fish market, from the tree garden and farmers market to the downtown arts district, and even the residential apartments are explored. Rapture truly feels like a full city, and you're able to see how things worked before everything went downhill. There are even times where you'll see ghosts, visions of how some people lived in Rapture, which paint a picture that things may not have been perfect even when things were supposedly good. As for the main story itself, it progresses naturally as you go through the game. What starts as just needing to get out of Rapture later turns into a mission to kill Andrew Ryan and finally put a stop to the madness. You meet an interesting cast of characters along the way, from the German scientist Tenenbaum, who created the little sisters you see throughout the game, and Dr. Steinman, a surgeon who is obsessed with making people beautiful, to Peach Wilkins, a man paranoid that Fontaine may still be alive, and Sander Cohen, the insane artist that has you kill people for his art project. Eventually, you do make it to Andrew Ryan, and you learn that you have been under hypnotic control since the beginning of the game, and whenever you hear the now infamous phrase, "Would you kindly?" you must do whatever that person says. You do kill Ryan, only for Atlas to take over Rapture and reveal that he was Fontaine the whole time. Now you must take down Fontaine to end their madness in Rapture with the help of Tenenbaum. The story progresses naturally, and while the whole "I was the villain the whole time" twist is a bit cliché, the story is still fantastic and never gets boring.
Bioshock not only builds its world visually, but audibly as well. Occasionally, you'll hear announcements play over a loudspeaker, or some music will play in the background on a record player. These are extra details that didn't need to be included, but their presence in the game makes Rapture to be a more believable environment.
The best part of how Bioshock builds its world and story is that there are audio diaries to collect through the game. These are optional, but they give a great insight into the different characters and events that happened when Rapture was still a functioning city. You get to meet new characters you don't otherwise meet during the game, like Diane McClinton or Dr. Shu Chong. The audio diaries are where most of the character development can be found, and they are always a treat to find. These extra details make the world of Bioshock come alive, and the story presented is simply amazing.
Now, story alone wouldn't make Bioshock as fondly remembered as it is. It needed strong gameplay as well. And boy does Bioshock deliver on the gameplay.
Bioshock's gameplay has so many layers to it that comparing it to a several layer cake wouldn't do it justice. Hell, the game even has more layers than an onion. Or an ogre. The main gameplay element is the plasmid system, powers that alter your genetic code to allow you to do all sorts of crazy things. The plasmids take on different forms and are quite versatile, typically taking on multiple uses. You have offensive powers like Electrobolt and Incinerate that can be used on enemies directly, or can be used on the environment around you. If you shock a body of water, it stays electrocuted for a small amount of time and enemies instantly die from it, and oil spills can be ignited for a bit with Incinerate. You have defensive plasmids that can be used to get big daddies or security bots on your side to protect you. Telekinesis can not only launch attacks or objects at enemies, but can also be used to retrieve out-of-reach items. You can even unleash a swarm of bees at enemies, which is just badass. Plasmids cost EVE to use, and you refill your EVE with EVE hypos. The nice thing about the EVE system is that no matter how much EVE you have, or what your maximum EVE capacity is, one EVE hypo will completely refill your EVE meter. Also, plasmids will cost the same amount of EVE to use, but even if you don't have the amount of EVE that usually gets subtracted, you can still use the plasmid, which is really generous. Complementary to the plasmid system is the gunplay, which is also spectacular. The variety of weapons at your disposal is just perfect. You've got the standard pistol, Tommy gun, and shotgun, but you've also got the grenade launcher, the chemical thrower, which is essentially a flamethrower that can also shoot ice and electricity, and the crossbow, which is surprisingly powerful, and you can get ammo back for it. Your melee weapon, the wrench, stays effective for most of the game, and is useful for finding secrets or opening stuff in the environment. Switching between plasmids and weapons is very fluid, and keeps combat fast-paced. Another touch is that each weapon has 3 different types of ammo you can use, which deal more damage to certain enemies, deal different elemental damage, or change how the weapon is used, like setting up traps with the grenade launcher's proximity mines, or the crossbow's trap wires. Each weapon can also receive 2 upgrades from weapon upgrade stations, which increase the weapon's damage, ammo capacity, fire rate, and so on. However, the most useful tool at your disposal is the camera. With the camera, you can take pictures of enemies, which fills up a research meter. Everything can be researched with this thing, not just the splicers, but security cameras and bots, turrets, big daddies, and even little sisters. When the research meter is filled, you can learn what enemies are weak to, increase the damage you deal to those enemies, and even earn tonics. Tonics act like perks in the game, and are split into physical, engineering, and combat categories. Physical tonics affect how you heal and move, engineering tonics affect the difficulty of hacking, and combat tonics change how much damage you deal or take. There are over 50 tonics that can be equipped, which vary greatly. Some tonics will boost elemental damage, like fire or electricity, some are defensive, some boost your wrench damage, and some favor plasmid use with less EVE use or gaining EVE from health kits. The tonics mixed with the plasmids and weapons allows for so many different playstyles, and no one strategy seems to overpower any other. This makes the game open for more players, which is always a plus for any game. Plus, you can change your setup at one of the game's many gene banks, so you can easily try new things to find out what works and what doesn't.
Oh, and we're just getting started with how expansive this gameplay is. When I said this game has layers, I meant it.
Hacking is another big component of Bioshock. All vending machines, security cameras, bots, turrets, and even safes can be hacked. The minigame for hacking is phenomenal, as it takes direct inspiration from Pipe Dream, having you connect pipes to the exit tube. This is a fun distraction, and it never gets boring. The tonics you can get for hacking makes things easier by removing broken or security tiles that will end your hack, making the flow rate slower, or lowering the difficulty of a hack. Alternatively, you can also buy out of a hack for a bit of money, with harder hacks being more expensive, or you can use an automatic hacking tool to just bypass the hack. Hacking is worth the effort, as vending machines will lower their prices and offer new items, and security cameras, bots, and turrets will defend you. There are U-invent machines that allow you to craft alternate ammo and a few tonics. You get parts to craft with from enemies or searchable containers, and these machines can be pretty useful at times, especially if you make the heat-seeking RPGs or automatic hacking tools. The U-invents can also be hacked, so it takes less material to make things. Bioshock has plenty of consumable items that have some depth to them. Food items will recover health, Eve, or both, while other items will recover one but drain the other. Alcohol will recover health but drain Eve, while cigarettes will recover Eve but drain health. This makes it so you have to be careful about what items you consume, which is an amazing detail. There are even slot machines you can play to try to get more money, which is something that didn't even need to be included, but it's in the game and it works. These small details in the gameplay really elevate Bioshock and make it even better of an experience than it already is.
Now, the biggest aspect of the gameplay is the Little Sister mechanic, which deserves to be looked at on its own, separate from everything else in the game, as it is that important and intricate.
Little Sisters are protected by Big Daddies, who must be defeated in order to get to the Little Sisters. Big Daddies are some of the toughest enemies in the game, and can be a challenge even when you are decked out with powerful weapons and plasmids. The Big Daddies come in two flavors: bouncers that will charge at you, and Rosies that will shoot at you from a distance with their rivet gun or toss mines at you. Little Sisters have Atom, which is what allows for plasmids and tonics to exist. In-game, Atom acts as a currency that can be spent at Gatherer's Garden machines to purchase new plasmids, tonics, additional plasmid and tonic slots, and health and Eve upgrades. Where things get interesting and complicated is that you can choose to either harvest the Little Sisters, or at the request of Tannenbaum you can rescue them. Harvesting the Little Sisters will give you the most Atom, 160 to be exact, but they don't survive. Saving the Little Sisters cures them, turning them back into normal children, but you only get half the Atom. This brings up the moral question of which is better: harvesting the Little Sisters to ensure your own survival, or doing the right thing by saving them at your own risk. Or at least that's what the game tries to set up. The incentive to saving the Little Sisters is that Tannenbaum will give you a gift for doing so. Every 3 Little Sisters you save gets you a gift, which contains 200 items each time, as well as new plasmids, tonics, and other small gifts like health kits and ammo. The gifts that Tannenbaum gives you basically take away the moral weight to this aspect of the game, as it is absolutely better to save all the Little Sisters. Mathematically speaking, you only lose 40 Atom for saving 3 Little Sisters compared to harvesting them. Couple that with the additional plasmids and tonics you get for free, and you end up more powerful than you would be if you harvested all the Little Sisters. This is the one thing that is a major blemish on this game, as there is no longer weight to the situation. If you got less Atom from the gifts, say only 100, then it would be a more complicated decision, but as it is in-game, the choice is obvious.
Even though this mechanic drops the ball a little bit by having, but not really having, a moral quandary, it's still an interesting part of the game, and Bioshock overall is truly a great game.
If you boil Bioshock down to its most basic form, the game is essentially a series of fetch quests. Peach Wilkins has you get the camera and take pictures of spider splicers, you need to craft the Lazarus Vector in order to save Rapture's trees, Sander Cohen straight up stops you from proceeding until you help him with his art project, and before you get to Ryan's office, you need to literally make an EMP bomb. However, the surprising thing is that the game never feels like a fetch quest. Sure, the path to the next level is typically short and right in front of you, but instead you have to explore the surrounding area and grab some stuff before leaving, yet Bioshock's layered gameplay experience helps to keep things interesting and entertaining. On top of that layered gameplay are subversions that have the player play the game differently. There's a part of the game where you lose all your weapons and need to rely on your plasmids and wrench to survive, which was an interesting challenge. What's better is that after killing Andrew Ryan, there's a whole segment of the game where your max health slowly decreases, and in order to stop it, you need to get the cure for Fontaine's mind control, which then leads into another segment where you need to use random plasmids that change regularly until you complete the cure. This part of the game was so amazing, and I loved the need to use plasmids I typically didn't and having to adapt on the fly. Turning yourself into a big daddy at the end of the game and needing to escort the little sister was also nice, and as far as escort missions go, this one was above average. The little sister moves at a reasonable pace. My favorite part of the game, however, had to be the Fort Frolic level and Sander Cohen. Killing the 4 former disciples and taking their pictures isn't the most challenging or interesting task, but this segment of the game is still so fun. Sander Cohen as a character is such a crazy and interesting character that you don't at all mind finishing his masterpiece. The Fort Frolic area is fun to explore with shops, bars, and casinos. And then there's the survival segment of the level, where you need to fend off waves of splicers while Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers plays. This was honestly my favorite moment in the game. It's so simple gameplay wise, but it is also a beautiful moment with contrast between the music and the action that I can't help but to love it. That and the song is just a jam. I don't listen to classical music much, but when I do, it hits a sweet spot. And one last awesome detail that tops this level off is that when the masterpiece is finished, Sander Cohen simply rewards you and allows you to leave. When I first played the game, I thought he would betray me like Wilkins did, but no, he simply wanted someone to help finish his masterpiece, which makes him one of the few honest characters you meet in Rapture. You, on the other hand, can kill him if you want, and if you do, you can open his secret chest. But you actually don't want to do this, because you then lose access to his apartment at a later point in the game, where you can kill him then and get a weapon upgrade that would otherwise be lost. This is a detail that is insanely amazing and is a perfect example of how Bioshock goes above and beyond to create a masterful experience. The only part of the game that comes off as a bit of a disappointment is the final boss fight against Fontaine. The fight is really simple. Lower Fontaine's health and then go up to him and drain his atom, and it's admittedly very easy. Fontaine's attacks are easy to dodge, and even when security bots and splicers join the fight, they don't get in the way. However, I'm going to give this fight a pass, as boss fights in FPS games are hard to pull off, as for the most part they just end up being bullet sponges anyway.
Bioshock's gameplay is so intricate and diverse, offering an experience to the player that is never stale and always fun. There are so many layers, with plasmids, tonics, gunplay, upgrading weapons, different ammo types, hacking, inventing, and even small details like consumables that lower one of your stats and slot machines make this game spectacular. Combine all of that with the Little Sister and Atom system and different shakeups to the gameplay, and you've got a must-play game. However, Bioshock doesn't just have a great story and top-of-the-line gameplay, but it's also smart, with heavy philosophical themes.
Now, I'm not trying to be a wisecrack or a game theory when I say this, but Bioshock's take on philosophy is just as impressive as its story and gameplay. This is immediately evident at the beginning of the game with a banner that states, "No gods or kings, only man." This idea is immediately reiterated with the intro video that plays as you enter Rapture. Andrew Ryan built Rapture as a place where people could excel without worrying about being held back by governmental forces or religious doctrines. It is a city that champions two things: individual freedom and human exceptionalism.
Now, I wanted to quickly mention that a lot of Bioshock's philosophy comes from Ayn Rand and her works, with Andrew Ryan being a loose anagram for Ayn Rand, and Fontaine taking up the alias of Atlas, a reference to Atlas Shrugged. I'm not going to focus on these references to outside media in this video. For one, these topics have been covered extensively by other people smarter than I am, and I want to focus on how these themes impact the story, and more importantly, the gameplay.
Throughout Bioshock, one question is consistently raised. What would happen to people if they were able to do whatever they wanted, and what would they do with this power? The answer seems to be pretty consistent, that when given unlimited freedom and the ability to excel as one sees fit, they will go crazy and become evil. The first obvious example of this are the many splicers of Rapture, who, in the process of using Atom to genetically modify themselves, become addicted to the process and went insane. Within the main story, the first instance of this is Dr. Steinman, who began as a simple cosmetic surgeon, but then started to become obsessed with making everyone as beautiful as possible, which led to him killing some people. Sander Cohen, in the pursuit of art, kills a whole bunch of people, turning them into sculptures or having you take their pictures for his masterpiece. While it is true that these characters excel in their given fields, it comes at the expense of others' well-being and general morality. The game's many audio diaries document the drawbacks of this philosophy, with the plasmid industry being unregulated, which leads to the death of some. This freedom is what transformed the Little Sisters into what you see in-game. On top of all this, Andrew Ryan himself tries to completely destroy Rapture twice to preserve the integrity of his vision, first by killing all the trees, and then by trying to self-destruct everything. Time and time again, this game says that unlimited freedom and no limitations will corrupt the individual, that self-interest will inevitably lead to evil.
But is that necessarily the case? Is Bioshock's answer to this question so cut and dry? I would argue no, because the game gives you, the player, a choice.
One of Bioshock's greatest aspects is that it can cater to many different playstyles. This is clearly evident in the many different ways you can customize your plasmid and tonic setup, and with the order you choose to upgrade weapons in. However, this goes even deeper when it comes to choosing whether to save the Little Sisters or to harvest them. Ignoring that it is objectively better to save them, and just looking at the moral question at hand, the player is free to use their freedom to dictate how they survive in Rapture and change the world around them. By harvesting the Little Sisters, you give yourself the best chance of survival, but you end up killing the Little Sisters, while if you save them you put yourself at risk, but for the greater good. This decision affects the ending you get, with the good ending coming from saving all the Little Sisters. Giving this choice to the player makes the question a bit more complex, as it opens the possibility of using unlimited freedom and exceptional talents for a noble cause. While everyone else in Rapture is only concerned with their own self-interests, you, the player, can be a much-needed beacon of hope, if you choose to be. This is what makes Bioshock's philosophical elements so good, that there isn't an obvious answer, and the answer to if perfect freedom is a positive or negative force is up to the player to decide. I think Andrew Ryan summed it up best.
A man chooses, a slave obeys.
Bioshock is a masterpiece of video games. Its story works on multiple levels, both as a narrative that is built around the gameplay, and as a world-building experience with the many audio diaries that delve into the history of Rapture and the atmospheric details that surround the player. The gameplay is diverse and complex, with many layers that combine into a one-of-a-kind experience. The game does so much to make a memorable gameplay experience for the player, and even if some of the smaller details were absent, like the slot machines or the consumables that negatively affect you, the game would still be amazing. It raises philosophical questions that are smart and leave the player with something to reflect on. It combines all of these expertly crafted elements and makes a one-of-a-kind gaming experience that can only be described as a masterpiece. I give Bioshock 99 Atom out of 100.